to extend a warm welcome and thank you for joining our presentation tonight. My name is Cindy Schufelt, and I'm a school support counselor with Safe Schools and Wellbeing at the Thames Valley District School Board. And I'm here tonight with my colleagues, Caitlin and Megan, who I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hello, everybody. We are so excited to have you here, especially for this little mini series in recognition of Bullying Prevention and Awareness Week. We know that this topic is really important to so many in our community. And so I'm really excited to have you here. As Cindy mentioned, my name is Caitlin Chow. I am one of the learning coordinators for Safe Schools and Wellbeing with Thames Valley as well. I am an educator and have typically been in the elementary panel. Welcome.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Megan, and I am also a member of the Safe Schools and Wellbeing team, and my role is an implementation coach. So I work with a number of schools in the board to help implement the essential conditions for learning. Happy to be here tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Great, thank you so much. So as Caitlin mentioned, we are fortunate to be a part of this collaboration between local school boards and community agencies with the goal to host these family and well-being workshops. And these presentations are online throughout the year, so we encourage you to continue to check in because we will be having varying topics and presenters. So we are so thrilled to welcome our speakers tonight, Carrie, Linda, and Holly, who are from St. Leonard's Community Service School-based program, and I thank them so much for joining us, and we will turn things over them to now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Family Wellbeing Community Workshop, Understanding and Exploring Restorative Practices for Parents and Caregivers. My name is Carrie Posno, and I'm here with my colleagues Linda Gano-Bain and Holly Deckard. We're with the Restorative Approaches team with an organization called St. Leonard's Community Services, which is partnered with the Thames Valley District School Board and currently with the London Catholic District School Board in our other school-based program, Peer Power, to implement restorative approaches in our schools. We're excited to be with you today to share some information on restorative practices and how we can be restorative in schools, in our home, and in our community. This is our agenda for the presentation today. Our intention of this session is to offer an overview of what our team does, explain some restorative practice theory and concepts, and provide you with some examples of how you can implement restorative practices within your home and family. As well, we hope to highlight the importance of your participation working with your school community to help build strong and resilient relationships that fosters environments for effective learning for all. Our presentation will have an opportunity for you to ask questions. However, the Q&A period will follow after our presentation is complete. Please make note of any questions you may have and save them for this period.
Out of deep respect for the Indigenous peoples of Canada, St. Leonard's recognizes that its work and the work of its community partners takes place on the traditional Indigenous territories across our region and geography. The sacred land on which we deliver service has been the site of human activity for thousands of years, and Indigenous people have been the stewards of these lands, sharing the natural resources and harvesting only what was needed for their sustenance. We acknowledge that the lands we call home are the traditional lands and waters of the Anishinaabe, the Attawandaron, the Haudenosaunee, and the Lenape peoples. Today, this place is home to many Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community on this territory. There are long-standing relationships with the 3 local First Nations groups of this land. These communities include Chippewa of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and Munsee Delaware Nation. We are grateful to live and work on these lands. We are committed to working towards reconciliation and to supporting the recommendations of Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. This will involve listening to, learning from, and working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We are fully committed to taking action to ensure that Indigenous peoples feel welcome, respected, and enabled to thrive within our programs and services and as employees of our agency. The roots of restorative practices and principles extend across multiple Indigenous peoples around the globe, including First Nations of North America, Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. The Indigenous vision is a holistic one that is inclusive of both the community and individuality. It's a way of being that respects all and values all, During challenging times and times of conflict, it is a practice that views harm and pain and even trauma as community issues, not just belonging to those immediately involved.
So as we mentioned, we're from an organization called St. Leonard's, and as an organization, we are committed to promoting positive changes in the lives of people who are or could be in conflict with the law. We are not a religious organization. St. Leonard's has a lot of programs and services offered to individuals in conflict with the law, experiencing homelessness or mental health concerns. St. Leonard's values are inclusion, collaboration, compassion, and accountability. To be inclusive, we are non-judgmental and recognize the uniqueness and dignity of each person we are working with. We collaborate with a variety of community organizations to create purposeful, lasting connections within our community. We are compassionate when accompanying others on this journey, and we treat them with empathy, flexibility, commitment, and respect. Finally, we value accountability and invite program participants to take accountability, learn, and grow while they receive compassionate support from our organization.
As we briefly mentioned, we are from the St. Leonard's Restorative Approaches school-based team. Our team is made up of myself, Carrie Posno, Linda Gonabane, and Holly Deckard, with over 45 years of combined experience in restorative justice. We're also trainers for the International Institute of Restorative Practices, which we provide training internally and externally. Our team is referred to by administrators to support the use of restorative approaches interventions in schools. Some of the referrals we receive are support for student conflicts, which can include breakdown of friendships, targeting behavior, student stereotyping, racism, and cultures, in addition to providing training and workshop for TVDSB staff. Our team has a unique position of bridging justice, education, and we are continually finding new ways to encourage the use of restorative approaches in our community. This diagram demonstrates the hierarchy of St. Leonard's school-based program support. Our programs are based on a strong restorative justice-based communication skills foundation and provide students with an opportunity to expand their communication and conflict resolution skills and navigate their peer conflicts at every stage of the restorative process. At the bottom of this triangle is where Peer Power focuses on community building, working in circles, and through experiential learning model, address behaviors utilizing restorative language in the moment. In the middle, you see the focus is more targeted skill building with our peer mediation and peer leadership programs that help equip skills to be effective peer supporters. At the top of this triangle is where our team will be referred by school administrators when conflicts and harm have occurred, and we work with students, families, and school staff to acknowledge and repair harm, whether through individual support, student agreements, mediations, or more formal conferencing depending on the situation. Our team usually works in prevention to help avoid justice involvement and to keep students engaged in their education.
On this side, you can see some of the underlying values and beliefs rooted in restorative approaches in schools. Simply put, restorative approaches value respect, growth, accountability, inclusion, and diversity. This approach believes that people have the capacity to change and that with compassionate support, problems and conflicts can be resolved. Restorative approaches value diversity and inclusion and highlight the importance of a safe approach to solving problems and conflicts where the needs, values, and goals of those involved are considered. Restorative approaches are about building, repairing, and maintaining healthy, respectful relationships.
What are restorative practices? They are a framework that acknowledges that relationships are central to building lasting connections and community among people. Restorative approaches works to give each person involved an opportunity to share their voice, their feelings, their story, and how they've been impacted. This type of approach establishes high expectations for the people to take accountability when they have caused harm, and has done so providing high levels of support to do that. Restorative practices emphasize the importance of doing things with someone instead of doing things to them or for them. We're going to speak further about this point later in our presentation.
We have a short video to show you from the International Institute of Restorative Practices that gives a great overview of what restorative practices entail.
Our world is changing at a breathtaking pace. Social patterns that have long characterized human life are changing dramatically around the globe, diminishing social bonds within families, schools, workplaces, and communities. But humans are hardwired to connect. Just as we need food, shelter, and clothing, we also need strong and meaningful relationships to thrive. With all this in mind, what is restorative practices? Restorative practices is an emerging social science that studies how to strengthen relationships between individuals and within communities. When put into practice, the effects are profound. In schools, students experience greater safety and sense of belonging, resulting in improved behavior, less bullying, and less violence. In workplaces, leaders facilitate direct communication among staff and address conflict as it arises. The result is higher performance, greater accountability, and effective collaboration. In criminal justice, new options allow victims and offenders, friends and family, to repair the emotional harm caused by crime. Throughout our neighborhoods, restorative practices give regular people more voice in the issues that matter most. In a nutshell, restorative practices is the science of relationships and community. Your individual daily interactions have a big impact on the world around you, at your job, with young people, and throughout your community. How we relate matters. This video was brought to you by the International Institute for Restorative Practices. To learn more, attend our flagship event, Basic Restorative Practices, enroll in a graduate course, or join us at a world conference.
You may have already heard about using restorative justice practices in the criminal justice system and wonder why we would use them in schools. For students, restorative approaches are a collaborative problem-solving method. It focuses on hearing about impact, on addressing harm, and coming to a respectful resolution for all involved so that everyone can move forward feeling welcome and safe to learn at school. Restorative approaches aim to address harm, to strengthen relationships, and build community. They work toward a resolution for all the parties involved. This means that students impacted by the conflict have an opportunity to explain what they need to move forward. It's important to note that while restorative approaches focuses on relationships, the goal of restorative approaches is not to restore personal or intimate relationships. We work to promote equality in social relationships. And when we're working with students, something that we tell them is that we're not here to make people be friends. Restorative practices give students the opportunity to participate in solving their own conflicts at school with support, while developing healthy communication skills that will benefit for the rest of their lives. Some of these communication skills include learning how to use effective statements, neutrally summarizing statements, and using restorative language and questions. These skills will help students solve conflicts in other aspects of their lives outside of school in a healthy way. We will take some time later to introduce you to some of the restorative questions that help people to have difficult conversations. Restorative practices encourage students to take accountability for their actions and seek help from trusted adults when necessary. It provides students with a safe environment where they can share and discuss their perceptions of the conflict with an unbiased and neutral party. Something we're currently doing is working with student peer leaders to train them to use restorative approaches to help solve conflicts on the schoolyard, and learning when to ask an adult for help if the conflict is too difficult to manage. There are countless evidence-based studies to demonstrate that restorative practices in education reduce the number of suspensions and expulsions for students.
So agreements are something that can be used in just about any situation where there could be the possibility for conflict. You could use an agreement in a classroom, for a sports team, for a club, or even in your home. An agreement is a set of terms of conditions that are collaboratively created by a group. An agreement can be used preventatively to try to stop conflicts from occurring, or can be referred to when a conflict arises or escalates to reestablish boundaries. An agreement is different from a code of conduct as it is not discipline or punishment oriented. Instead, people think about things that they need to be able to work, learn, or collaborate effectively. For example, a classroom agreement could include things like treating each other with respect and listening attentively when others are speaking. A classroom agreement may be posted on the wall at the beginning of the year and referred back to if the class is experiencing conflict or being disrespectful. The great thing about agreements are that they can act as a point of reference for when conflict arises again, and they hold everybody accountable for creating and maintaining an environment that is conducive to everybody's values. Usually agreements are created collaboratively so that everyone is able to share things that are important to them or that they value. For the purpose of this presentation, since we can't create an agreement interactively right now, this is an example of what an agreement could look like. When you're making your own agreements, try to list things that you want to see instead of listing behaviors that you want to avoid. So for example, instead of saying, don't speak over others, try to list the positive behavior that you would like to see, such as listen actively and wholeheartedly. You can use agreements in many different settings, and they can include any number of people. For example, you could have an agreement for an entire classroom, one between a smaller group of people in conflict, or even individual agreements where people can list things that they are committing to a person, a school, club, or team, or even their parents. Agreement should reflect the uniqueness of your own family and your values and beliefs. So these are some of the things that we would like everyone to agree to for this presentation. So we'd like everybody to listen actively and wholeheartedly. We'd like to treat each other with respect, be patient and kind throughout the presentation and the Q&A period. And we'd also like you to recognize that the RA team are not social workers or psychologists, and we work in collaboration with appropriate school support professionals. During the Q&A, we ask that you challenge questions with care and compassion. And it's important that we all recognize our own perspectives, limitations, and privileges when we're working in diverse communities. Finally, we just ask everybody to assume the best in others.
This slide is a graphic of the social discipline window, which is a cornerstone of the IRP training. When plotted on a graph measuring expectations on the one side and supports on the other, it gives us 4 possible options of how people in positions of authority work with others, each with very distinct impacts. Depending on everyone's social positions, people who may be in position of authority over each of us can include supervisors, teachers, caregivers, coaches, etc. If you look at the box on the top left, you see that a person who has very high expectations but offers very low support is working from a punitive or authoritarian place and does things to people. On the bottom right corner, a person who offers very high support but has very low expectations is permissive and does things for people. On the bottom left is a person who has very low expectations and offers little to no support, and they are neglectful, and this is not doing things for others. And then lastly, on the top right, is a person who has high expectations and offers high support to meet those expectations, and this is restorative, a person that works with others. And that is the one we're striving for by using restorative practices. This is not to say that there aren't situations where we might each need to or choose to use either of the styles, but as the fundamental hypothesis from IRP says, people are happier, more cooperative and productive, and more likely to make positive change in behavior when those in positions of authority do things with them rather than to them or for them.
We wanted to be sure to include in this presentation that in order to proceed with the restorative approach, there may be some concerns that need to be addressed first. These include a bullying or harassment situation, which is one-sided, ongoing, and a repetitive abuse of power. It's important that both of you and your child and youth are aware of the difference between conflict and bullying, and please seek support from school staff when you're unsure. Another one of these concerns, if there's a serious mental health concern for one of the students involved. A restorative process still might be beneficial under these circumstances once these serious concerns have been addressed. Discipline window that my colleague just shared as one of the cornerstones of restorative practices, this can also be applied to parents and caregivers. Thinking about when a child or youth comes home and shares an incident or a conflict at school, often a first response, and as myself a parent, I can fully understand this, is to immediately want to address the situation at times with a blaming or punitive lens or response. It is our experience that often when youth relay these incidents at home, the accountability of their part, or at least understanding that there are other potential contributing factors or perspectives that have not been explored, happens. With a restorative mindset and utilizing restorative language, the hope is to slow down this reaction, work through the restorative questions to explore the situation further with our child, and also work with the school administrators and staff to ensure that all voices and perspectives are heard and that we understand clearly the expectations for all that who have been involved to be able to move forward.
This chart provides a really clear example of the differences between authoritarian and restorative approaches. The focus for an authoritarian approach is emphasizing the rule breaking, placing blame on one of the parties, and using punishment to deter future similar behaviors. The outcome of this approach is that the needs of the person affected are often ignored or unmet, and the needs behind the behavior are also ignored, which means that the behavior or conflict may happen again. With the authoritarian approach, there's a lack of accountability for the party that harms someone, and it's oriented toward punishment rather than repairing harm. Whereas with a restorative approach, the focus is on addressing the harm that has been done and using problem-solving, dialogue, and negotiation to repair relationships. The outcome of using a restorative approach is that the needs of those affected are addressed and the unmet needs behind the behavior are also addressed. Restorative approaches ask individuals to consider what needs to happen to make things right, which allows for apologies, repairing relationships, and specifying what is needed in order to move forward.
This is a diagram of the restorative practices continuum. As you move along the continuum from left to right, the range of practices is both proactive and responsive. As you begin to incorporate restorative practices in your daily interactions, we work towards 80% proactive relationship building restorative practices and 20% responsive experiences. As you move along this continuum, these processes start to take more time, have more structure, and more planning and more skill. Effective statements. These are brief statements about the impact of another person's behavior on ourselves, usually done in the form of an I statement. They encourage people to clearly verbalize how they are feeling in relation to another person's behavior. Providing feedback, they help to set boundaries, and they model empathy and teach empathy. They can be proactive or responsive in nature. You see, along this, utilizing this restorative language in informal opportunities with individuals, there are more formal processes, such as working in circles. Your child or youth could include be included in a classroom circle at school, or you can have a circle that includes all family members at home. With the intention is that all voices are heard and valued. And at the end of this continuum is more formal conferencing, which would bring together the person that has been harmed with the person that has caused harm, along with support people. Parents and caregivers could be invited to a restorative conference at the school in this format. We have another short video to show you of how restorative practices can work to address conflict.
Conflict is a fact of life. Wherever we live and whoever we spend our time with, none of us can avoid it or its consequences completely. But when we ignore the complex causes of conflict, we fail to prevent it from arising again. The pain and anxiety of it lingers. Many of us have come to fear conflict. The way it makes us feel, the way it erodes our self-esteem, damages our relationships, and impacts the people around us. When conflict arises, we often focus on who is right and who is wrong, who is the victim and who is the perpetrator, who broke the rules, who should apologize and who should be punished. By using restorative approaches, we can guide those involved to a genuine and lasting resolution, while at the same time equipping them with the skills to successfully navigate conflict throughout their lives. It takes patience, skill, and empathy to involve all parties, a commitment to listening hard and seeking common ground. But through restorative approaches, you can discuss and map the key events and emotions that lead to conflict, recognize its impact on relationships, and empower everyone involved to find the best path out of it, repairing as much harm as possible on their way. You can provide them with a new perspective from which to understand how their conflict affects other people, directly and indirectly, and to see the harm that unresolved conflict can do to friendships, families, and communities. From there, the focus is on finding real solutions, not taken from a rule book, but tailored to individual needs. In schools, care homes, prisons and beyond, there is a growing recognition of the power in using restorative approaches to conflict, because it's clear that the lessons of a single conflict, creatively and successfully resolved, can change lives and last a lifetime.
These are some questions that you can use when you're speaking to your child or youth when they've instigated a conflict. Start by asking what happened, and use this statement instead by avoiding the reflexive statement of what did you do, replacing it with what happened. This can be a conversation starter. After they explain their perspective of the incident, you can ask them to reflect on what were they thinking at the time. Ask them what they're thinking about now in regards to the conflict. You'll be moving them from the past into the present. Next, ask who was affected by your actions. Allow them to explain who have been impacted by this conflict, even those not directly involved. They may need your support in this process to help identify people that they might have harmed. This allows for them to take accountability for their role and recognize who they have impacted and in what way they were impacted. Finally, ask, what do you think needs to happen for you to make things right? Allow for them to take accountability and determine ways that they can offer to repair the harm. Some people will print out these questions and put them on the fridge so that any member of the family can access them to help guide them when important and possibly difficult conversations, we want them to go well. We can use these questions to help guide us in our conversation. When speaking with someone who has been harmed by a conflict, these are some of the questions that we can use to guide the conversation. Start by asking, what did you think when you realized what had happened? And allow them to share their perspective of the story. Next, ask what impact has the incident had on you and others? And ask, what has been the hardest thing for you? What do you think needs to happen to make things right? All of these questions can help you guide you through a restorative conversation at home.
There are lots of ways that you can practice restorative approaches within your home. Using these restorative strategies will contribute to a restorative community and help teach your child a variety of communication and conflict resolution skills. One of the things you can do to be restorative at home is focus on repairing harm produced by conflict instead of punishment. Try and determine what need was unmet that may have led to the behavior or conflict. You can also approach conflicts at home from a neutral as possible, unbiased perspective, trying to avoid assigning blame when there's conflict. Instead, please use some of the tools that we have shared with you in this presentation that include family agreements, effective statements, I statements about how you feel, restorative questions, and sit in family circles hearing all voices. Educators and parents who interact restoratively with students model effective ways of building and maintaining emotionally healthy relationships and promote helpful pro-social attitudes. A restorative mindset is a worldview that values inclusive, collaborative approaches for being together in any community. Emphasis on healthy, respectful relationships is central at value at school. We're modeling effective communication and helpful relationships promotes pro-social attitudes.
We know that social media can both create and escalate conflicts, and conflicts occurring online can be harder to identify. Statistics Canada found in 2019 that 25% of youth aged 12 to 17 had reported experiencing cyberbullying in the previous year. We can only imagine how these rates have changed since the pandemic, and it's important to recognize how to address cyberbullying and conflict online. This Statistics Canada study did find that the risk of cyberbullying was lower when parents knew about the activities that their youths were engaging with online. We encourage you to have conversations with you and your youth about healthy social media use, online safety, and reporting conflicts that occur online when necessary to trusted adults. Later this week, there's going to be a presentation through the Family Wellbeing Community Workshops by London Police Service, specifically on cyberbullying. So if cyberbullying and social media related conflicts are an issue or an area of concern in your home, we recommend that you attend this presentation and utilize the information and resources provided by Safe Schools and LPS on their website. Trauma-informed care is an approach to providing services and support that considers the impact that trauma can have on an individual's behavior and actions. Trauma-informed care understands the prevalence of trauma and recognizes signs and symptoms when present, and effectively responds with empathy and support while working to actively avoid re-traumatization. Trauma-informed care and restorative approaches both utilize a victim-centered approach and give voice, choice, validation, and the opportunity for reparation to those harmed by crime and conflict. Both of these approaches also focus on the harms that have occurred and gives the opportunity to discuss what else may have contributed to the conflict, and uses storytelling, which is a path to healing where everyone involved can share and reflect on the conflict. Restorative approaches and trauma-informed care also use language that does not elicit blame. So both approaches use the phrase, "what happened," instead of "what did you do?" Finally, both of these approaches use fair process, which includes engagement involving individuals in the decisions that will impact them, explanation to ensure that everyone understands final decisions before they're made, and clarity of expectation, which means clearly stating and understanding new rules and expectations that need to be followed. This is an essential part of the process to ensure that we are working with individuals instead of to or for them.
Restorative practices are used in a variety of fields, and it's not limited to justice and education. Restorative approaches work towards building meaningful connections within our community to strengthen bonds and prevent conflict. One of our ongoing efforts is to support and encourage the use of restorative practices within our community as a whole. As an agency, we embrace opportunities to collaborate with community partners, where we come together with a restorative lens to listen, network, and share information about our services and brainstorm how we can work together to address complex community problems. One way to continue to support restorative practices and their benefits to help increase the capacity of this philosophy of working with others in our community. Outside of education, we have internally trained our whole St. Leonard staff and train and support community partners on this journey. While administrators, teachers, and other school staff are learning to work restoratively with your child and youth, we hope that after today's presentation, you have learned some skills that will allow you to be restorative at home, recognizing many of you are restorative already.
So how do restorative approaches contribute to school climate initiatives? So restorative approaches play an important role in contributing to school climate initiatives and ensuring that essential conditions for learning are met. Restorative approaches create safe spaces for students to understand each other and assist in developing healthy relationships and communication skills. Restorative processes are voluntary and require meaningful engagement, participatory decision-making, and active responsibility. Overall, restorative approaches contribute to a healthy school climate by providing a framework for building the capacity to solve conflicts safely within schools and sustaining and promoting healthy relationships through social emotional learning. There are many other benefits to restorative approaches as well. Allowing a student to explain and discuss the conflict in their own words and consider some of the contributing factors to the conflict may allow for other concerns to come to fruition. This could include mental health concerns, which is why we work closely in collaboration with school support staff to ensure that the student is receiving necessary services to best support them. Additionally, modeling restorative approaches in the classroom and at home contributes to creating a restorative community and will familiarize your child and youth with some of the concepts, language, and processes that will benefit their communication and conflict resolution skills long term. We would like to thank everyone for attending this presentation, and we hope that you learned some valuable information about restorative practices and how you can adopt your own restorative mindset as a caregiver. Restorative approaches build strong, meaningful, lasting connections and relationships within our community. We will now be having a Q&A period where we hope to have some more conversations about using restorative practices at home. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I am going to leave that slide up just in case anybody would like any of those key contact informations for the St. Leonard's team. We will be sharing key contact information for the Thames Valley team as well in a moment, but I'll just leave that up as we go through some of our question and answer period. But first of all, thank you to the three of you. It's very evident how much care and intentionality you put into that presentation. And we really appreciate the way that you're aligning not only your work, but with the schools, our essential conditions for learning, and also even just the work of the Leonard Police Services, and recognizing that how we can come together as a community to support one another to work through conflict. So thank you for that. All right, I'm coming back to the Q&A to see if anything else has been added. I don't see anything in the moment. I certainly wanted to maybe explore a little bit more as to how St. Leonard's is connected within our school buildings. So apart from the incredible training that you provide, the support that you provide, and that general approach, when might caregivers become aware of your presence within a building?
Cases are referred to the Restorative Approaches program from administrators in the building for a final approval, but we are contacted by parents, by support staff, by teachers, some of whom know of other people who have accessed our service. Some people have gone on the website and accessed service themselves. So there's many ways that people are in touch with us about restorative approaches. We also may be part of, trainings for their parent-teacher association or coming into their classrooms. There's a number of ways they might be involved, but it's an opportunity that's open to all youth of the Thames Valley Board. We usually work in restorative approaches usually from grade 3 and up, but restorative approaches in family settings, certainly there's no lower age level where those approaches aren't helpful. So just sort of typically we would work from grade 3 and grade 4 up to grade 12, but restorative practices are for everybody. Typically the youngest in our families are the ones most keenly attuned to things being fair. So they certainly enjoy family circles and restorative approaches because they're very fair.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And just for the sake of language purposes, because sometimes I know we interchange between them, this idea of like administrators, for caregivers that might be more familiar, is the principals. So the principals, the vice principals, the administrators within the building might be the ones who are reaching out to St. Leonard's for consultation or to request services.
And restorative approaches is a voluntary approach. So certainly youths and sometimes youth with a parent might meet with us for a first interview just to hear about the service, hear about what it could entail, and make a choice about if that's something that support that they would like, and that are free at any time to withdraw from the process. But we usually find that once people sit down together and hear that it really is a neutral process, it's not there to take sides, it's not there to assign blame, it really is to support. There would be very few that, once they feel really clear about what this option is, wouldn't choose to accept that support.
I'd like to add too that if parents are feeling that there is a conflict at school that might benefit from our services, they can definitely speak to the principal or to the teacher about how we might be able to come and support the situation. Just want to add that we always do have consent, of course, before we would meet with any student from parents, and we can answer any questions they might have as well before giving consent if they had any questions or concerns about what the process could look like. We would never bring students together, for example, if it's something that it wouldn't be beneficial or something that the student is not ready for or wouldn't want to re-victimize anyone. So feel free. Any parent can contact us to ask questions, but definitely just speak to their school principal or administrator if they think that we might be able to assist.
Thank you for that. I know we're doing this presentation in recognition of Bullying Prevention and Awareness Week, and I love that earlier in the presentation you addressed this idea of the difference between bullying and conflict. And that is something we'll get into a little bit more in Thursday's webinar as well. But just if you wouldn't mind sharing this idea of like, where do you see restorative approaches landing between those two things? Or when is the delineation happening in schools of our role fits here because it's conflict, but our role doesn't fit here in terms of when it becomes a bullying nature? Do you want to expand on that a little bit more?
I think that most situations that are happening in the schools would be conflicts. They'd be, ongoing situations where people are interacting with each other and coming into conflict with each other. But on rare occasion, there are instances of bullying, either where there have been conflicts and one person has withdrawn from the conflict and the other has kept going, or if a person is being targeted by another. So this certainly, it requires intervention from different professionals in the building, perhaps mental health supports, perhaps supports of the social worker. But once there is a level of accountability and ability to take a look at one's role in the behavior, a willingness to take a look at altering that behavior, of moving forward differently, then restorative approaches can definitely be a part of that. But when safety is an issue, that's something that has to be put in place first. Safety and mental health resources are sometimes need to be in place before a restorative approach can be considered or helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anybody in our audience who has any questions, whether that's with your microphone or not? I'm just checking the Q&A and I don't see anything else there. I just want to say a big thank you, and I'm going to ask Cindy to put up this slide with our contact information and just with a few closing remarks. And we do ask that you stay because there's a little piece with regards to feedback that Cindy will get into as well.
Okay, so again, I would like to thank Carrie, Linda, and Holly for their presentation tonight and kicking off our Bullying Awareness Week. I've had the privilege and feel quite honored to work with your organization and with you, and have seen where it has made such an impact for students to come together to kind of identify, how they can move forward and remain in school and to get along and to just to feel like they were being heard, I think is the biggest that I've taken away from your work. So again, I thank you. So as you can see, should anyone have any questions or require more information about our project overall, this slide will highlight our contacts. We also would greatly appreciate a few moments of your time if you could complete a survey for us about tonight's session. This helps us to serve the community better and helps us move forward. And lastly, we just want to highlight our website where you can find information about past workshops, maybe some future workshops, a feedback form. There's a suggestion box for future topics, and for other community partners to engage. You'll also find a link to sign up for our mailing list, which will keep up to date for all of our upcoming offerings from this series and our partners. So we wish everyone well, and we hope you will join us again at future workshops. So thank you, and take care.